I thought I had lived a fulfilling life, 45 years of steady work and service, ready at last to rest. But then my daughter invited me to live with her and asked to borrow money for a business. Because she was my child, I never drew up a loan agreement, and that was my greatest mistake. I lost every penny I had saved and was cast out without mercy. Still, I refused to give up, and in the end, they paid the price they deserved. My story begins 2 years ago, the morning I retired. Hannibal was covered in a thin layer of frost, the kind that sparkled on mailbox tops and made the grass look like it had stayed up too late. I remember holding my thermos of coffee on the porch, staring at the empty street where yellow school buses usually rolled through. I had worked at the middle school just 3 blocks down for 45 years, first as a library aide, then eventually the head librarian. Nothing glamorous, just books, dusty shelves, and children whispering secrets between the stacks when they thought I wasn't listening. We had a little retirement potluck in the teacher's lounge. People brought casseroles and store-bought cupcakes with plastic toothpicks stuck in the frosting. Mrs. Kellerman gave me a scarf she knitted herself, and Mr. Howard made one of his famous jokes about how I'd finally stop yelling about late fees. We laughed, and I smiled, but there was a strange emptiness under all the warmth. I suppose when something has filled your days for nearly half a century, even the dullest routine starts to feel like home. The first month after I retired, I tried to follow every piece of advice I'd ever clipped out of Reader's Digest. I took a 2-week bus tour through Tennessee, visited Graceland, and bought too many magnets. When I came back, I planted a little garden in the front yard, just a strip of soil near the fence with some marigolds, rosemary, and one stubborn tomato plant. I called it my quiet project. I thought that would be my life now, small pleasures, slow mornings, finally reading the books I had shelved but never opened. Then Thanksgiving came. Michelle and Brian arrived from St. Louis with my grandson Ron in tow. They brought sweet potato pie, a bottle of red wine I couldn't pronounce, and a big bag of laundry Michelle just hadn't gotten to. She hugged me tightly and kept saying how good I looked, how the house smelled like her childhood, how she missed the creak of my kitchen floor. Later that evening, after the dishes were done and Ron was asleep on the couch with a cartoon still playing, they brought it up. Brian said, at first, "Mom, this house is nice and all, but don't you think you deserve better? Something easier?" Michelle took my hand. "You've worked your whole life, Mom. You live out here alone, miles from everything. Wouldn't it be nicer to be close to us? We've got an extra bedroom. You could finally relax," Brian added. "And if you sold this place, you'd have plenty of money to enjoy yourself, hire help if you want it, travel. You've earned it." Then Ron, still in his pajamas, came and wrapped his little arms around my waist and mumbled, "Grandma, come live with us. I want you to pick me up from school." I won't lie, my heart softened. I told them I'd think about it. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling and thought of all the things I'd never done. I'd never seen the ocean, never tasted real French food, never slept in a hotel with silk sheets. I'd always been the woman behind the desk, the mother with the envelope of coupons, the one who said next time and meant never. But something about Ron's little voice, the way Michelle looked at me like I was fragile for the first time, made me feel wanted. The next afternoon, I told Eleanor and Jack, my neighbors across the street, what Michelle had proposed. Jack frowned. Eleanor stirred her tea slowly, her lips pressed tight. "You should think long and hard, Mildred," Eleanor said. "You can't unsell a house, and family is complicated when money's involved." Jack nodded. "Keep your savings separate and make sure you stay in control of your account. Don't let anyone talk you into anything." I laughed nervously, brushed it off. "They're my kids," I said. "They just want to help." But their warnings stuck. For a week, I paced my living room, made pros and cons lists in my notebook. Michelle kept texting, sending pictures of Ron at his school, of the backyard swing they'd put up just for him. Eventually, I gave in. 2 weeks later, I signed the paperwork to sell the house I'd lived in for 30 years. The closing price was $180,000, not bad for Hannibal, Missouri. I had another $150,000 in savings I'd built over the years, tucked away bit by bit from every paycheck, every tax return I never spent. I told myself this was a new chapter, a chance to finally be close to family, To not grow old alone in a town where the grocery store closed at 8 and nobody delivered after dark. On the morning of my move, the U-Haul looked too big for what little I had. I tried to pack smart, but I brought too much. Books I'd never read, knickknacks from garage sales, 3 slow cookers because I couldn't decide which one I liked best. Michelle arrived with Brian. She looked at my boxes and laughed gently. "Mom, you know they have pots and pans in the city, right?" I smiled. "I like my things." She rolled her eyes, but not unkindly. Brian stayed quiet, fiddling with his phone. We drove off. That afternoon, I looked out the window as my house grew smaller in the rearview mirror. The garden I had just planted was already wilting in the cold. Eleanor stood on her porch and waved, wrapped in her wool shawl, holding a casserole dish she said I could heat up just in case. I waved back until I couldn't see her anymore. Then I held the dish on my lap the rest of the way because it was warm and heavy and gave my hand something to hold on to. Michelle chatted the whole drive about St. Louis, how the traffic was awful but the museums were free, how I'd love the neighborhood farmers market, how I'd finally have access to real culture. Ron asked from the back seat if I could make I made pancakes every Saturday. I promised I would. By the time we arrived, the sky was turning purple. Michelle and Brian lived in a neat little 2-story duplex with a tiny patch of lawn and a red door. It wasn't fancy, but it looked clean and lived in. I told myself I could learn to love it. Brian helped unload the car, then went back inside. Michelle stayed, watching me pull out another box labeled Kitchen Fragile. She sighed, half laughing. "Mom, really? You brought the cookie jar? I like the sound it makes when you open it," I said. She shook her head. All right, but just so you know, you're officially a city woman now. No more tomato gardens, no more freezing your butt off for groceries. You're gonna live like a queen." I smiled, but something inside me shifted. Maybe it was the way she said it, like I had left something silly behind. Maybe it was just the cold. Either way, I was there now, in their house, in their world, and I truly believed it was where I was meant to be. The first few weeks at Michelle's were, in many ways, exactly what she had promised. The city moved faster than I was used to, but I liked the rhythm. Ron would burst into my room each morning, still half asleep, crawling under my blanket to warm up his cold feet. Michelle worked from home most days, typing away on her laptop at the kitchen table, sipping almond milk lattes she made with some fancy little machine. Brian came and went often, running errands or on calls about some investment opportunity one didn't really understand at first. Michelle suggested hiring a housekeeper. She said she was too busy and didn't want me to feel burdened, but I told her, "I'm not dead, Michelle. I've still got 2 good hands and more years of cooking than you've been alive." She laughed and let it go. I started handling the grocery runs, organizing the pantry, cooking most dinners, nothing too complicated: spaghetti, pot roast, grilled cheese, and tomato soup. When it rained, I found a church just 5 blocks away and started walking there on Sunday mornings, even joining the knitting circle on Wednesdays. It felt peaceful, like maybe I had finally found my rhythm outside the library, outside of Hannibal. There were little things, small disagreements with the neighbors about parking, Ron's tantrums when I told him to put his iPad down, and Brian's sharp tone when I accidentally shrunk one of his work shirts in the dryer. But nothing that truly bothered me. I told myself this was normal family life. I had never lived with adult children before, and I figured we were all adjusting. Then came the night Brian poured me a glass of red wine. We were sitting in the living room. Michelle had lit one of her lavender candles, and Ron was asleep upstairs. Brian swirled the wine in his glass and started talking, soft and smooth, like a man who had rehearsed this conversation. "We've been thinking," he said, "about opening a restaurant, an Italian place, classy but casual. We've got the concept, we've got the chef, just missing a bit of startup capital." I didn't say anything right away. I was watching the candle flicker, wondering why he was telling me this. Michelle leaned forward and put her hand on mine. "If you believe in us, Mom, this is the time." Brian nodded. "Just 60 grand, that's it. I'll sign whatever papers you want, I swear. But I promise this will pay off. We'll double it, easy." I sipped my wine. I wanted to say I needed to think about it, but their eyes were so expectant, so confident. Michelle squeezed my fingers just a little tighter. I had over 300,000 in the bank after selling the house, and counting my savings, 60,000 wasn't even a quarter of that. The idea of helping them build something felt good. It felt like finally doing something real for my daughter and her family, not just folding laundry and cooking meatloaf. So I said yes. They both hugged me. Michelle looked genuinely touched. Brian said he'd get started right away. 2 weeks later, he came back with his shoulders slumped and a bottle of whiskey in hand. "Bad news," he said. "One of our investors pulled out. I need to cover their part just to keep the lease. Could you do 50 more, just until we stabilize?" 50,000. I hesitated. My throat went dry. "Shouldn't we put something in writing this time?" Brian's voice was steady, calm. "If that makes you feel better, sure. But come on, Mom, you know we'd never screw you over." Michelle didn't say anything, she just stared at me, and for the first time, her expression wasn't warm, it was watchful. I didn't ask again. Over the next 2 months, the requests came in pieces: 10,000 for a new oven, 15,000 for permits, another 20 for furniture. Brian always said the same thing: "It's almost done, just need this last push." By the end of the second month, my savings were nearly drained. I had gone from feeling proud to feeling used, but I didn't know how to say no without sounding ungrateful, and honestly, I was embarrassed that I hadn't drawn boundaries, embarrassed that I was watching numbers disappear from my account without ever seeing the restaurant with my own eyes. 3 months passed. I asked Michelle, "Has the restaurant opened yet? Shouldn't there be some income coming in by now?" She gave a soft laugh. "It's not instant, Mom. These things take time. You're worrying too much." I was worried. I started waking up in the middle of the night and checking my bank app like it would show me a different number. I even called the utility company once to ask what would happen if I missed a payment. "Just asking," I said, pretending it wasn't real. Half a year after that first conversation over wine, Brian came into the kitchen one morning. He didn't say good morning. He didn't pour coffee. He sat down and stared at the counter for a long moment before saying, "The restaurant's closed. The landlord kicked us out. We couldn't keep up with rent. It's over." Michelle stood behind him, arms crossed, eyes down. I stood frozen. The spatula in my hand felt like it weighed 20 pounds. "What do you mean closed?" Brian's voice was flat. "We lost everything. The building's gone. Equipment's gone. We had to sell our condo too. We're moving into a rental this weekend." I swallowed. My mouth was dry, my heart loud in my ears. That was all my money, the house I sold, everything I saved. That was my life. Brian shrugged. "We didn't do it on purpose. Business is risky. You have to expect that." Michelle still hadn't spoken. She looked at me once, then looked away. That night, I sat on the floor of my borrowed bedroom with the door closed. I cried into a towel so no one would hear me. I thought about every dollar I had counted, every school lunch I had skipped for myself so I could save more, every coat I wore 2 winters too long so I wouldn't waste money. I thought about how small I suddenly felt in a house that was never mine. A week later, we moved to a smaller apartment on the edge of town. No backyard, no swing set, no warm casserole dish waiting on the porch, just noise, just traffic, just the sinking feeling that I had traded my quiet life for something much worse. The first few weeks at Michelle's were, in many ways, exactly what she had promised. The city moved faster than I was used to, but I liked the rhythm. Ron would burst into my room each morning, still half asleep, crawling under my blanket to warm up his cold feet. Michelle worked from home most days, typing away on her laptop at the kitchen table, sipping almond milk lattes she made with some fancy little machine. Brian came and went often, running errands or on calls about some investment opportunity one didn't really understand at first. Michelle suggested hiring a housekeeper. She said she was too busy and she didn't want me to feel burdened, but I told her, "I'm not dead, Michelle. I've still got 2 good hands and more years of cooking than you've been alive." She laughed and let it go. I started handling the grocery runs, organizing the pantry, cooking most dinners, nothing too complicated, spaghetti, pot roast, grilled cheese, and tomato soup when it rained. I found a church just 5 blocks away and started walking there on Sunday mornings, even joining the knitting circle on Wednesdays. It felt peaceful, like maybe I had finally found my rhythm outside the library, outside of Hannibal. There were little things, small disagreements with the neighbors about parking, Ron's tantrums when I told him to put his iPad down, and Brian's sharp tone when I accidentally shrunk one of his work shirts in the dryer. But nothing that truly bothered me. I told myself this was normal family life. I had never lived with adult children before, and I figured we were all adjusting. Then came the night Brian poured me a glass of red wine. We were sitting in the living room. Michelle had lit one of her lavender candles. Ron was asleep upstairs. Brian swirled the wine in his glass and started talking, soft and smooth like a man who had rehearsed this conversation. "We've been thinking," he said, "about opening a restaurant, an Italian place, classy but casual. We've got the concept, we've got the chef, just missing a bit of startup capital." I didn't say anything right away. I was watching the candle flicker, wondering why he was telling me this. Michelle leaned forward and put her hand on mine. "If you believe in us, Mom, this is the time." Brian nodded. "Just 60 grand, that's it. I'll sign whatever papers you want, I swear. But I promise this will pay off. We'll double it, easy." I sipped my wine. I wanted to say I needed to think about it, but their eyes were so expectant, so confident. Michelle squeezed my fingers just a little tighter. I had over 300,000 in the bank after selling the house and counting my savings. 60,000 wasn't even a quarter of that, and the idea of helping them build something felt good. It felt like finally doing something real for my daughter and her family, not just folding laundry and cooking meatloaf. So I said yes. They both hugged me. Michelle looked genuinely touched. Brian said he'd get started right away. 2 weeks later, he came back with his shoulders slumped and a bottle of whiskey in hand. "Bad news," he said. "One of our investors pulled out. I need to cover their part just to keep the lease. Could you do 50 more, just until we stabilize?" 50,000, I hesitated, my throat went dry. "Shouldn't we put something in writing this time?" Brian's voice was steady, calm. "If that makes you feel better, sure. But come on, Mom, you know we'd never screw you over." Michelle didn't say anything, she just stared at me, and for the first time, her expression wasn't warm, it was watchful. I didn't ask again. Over the next 2 months, the requests came in pieces: 10,000 for a new oven, 15,000 for permits, another 20 for furniture. Brian always said the same thing: "It's almost done, just need this last push." By the end of the second month, my savings were nearly drained. I had gone from feeling proud to feeling used, but I didn't know how to say no without sounding ungrateful, and honestly, I was embarrassed that I hadn't drawn boundaries, embarrassed that I was watching numbers disappear from my account without ever seeing the restaurant with my own eyes. 3 months passed. I asked Michelle, "Has the restaurant opened yet? Shouldn't there be some income coming in by now?" She gave a soft laugh. "It's not instant, Mom. These things take time. You're worrying too much." I was worried. I started waking up in the middle of the night and checking my bank app like it would show me a different number. I even called the utility company once to ask what would happen if I missed a payment. "Just asking," I said, pretending it wasn't real. Half a year after that first conversation over wine, Brian came into the kitchen one morning. He didn't say good morning, he didn't pour coffee. He sat down and stared at the counter for a long moment before saying, "The restaurant's closed. The landlord kicked us out. We couldn't keep up with rent. It's over." Michelle stood behind him, arms crossed, eyes down. I stood frozen. The spatula in my hand felt like it weighed 20 pounds. "What do you mean closed?" Brian's voice was flat. "We lost everything. The building's gone. One of the equipment's gone, we had to sell our condo too. We're moving into a rental this weekend." I swallowed, my mouth was dry, my heart loud in my ears. That was all my money, the house I sold, everything I saved. That was my life. Brian shrugged. "We didn't do it on purpose. Business is risky, you have to expect that." Michelle still hadn't spoken. She looked at me once, then looked away. That night, I sat on the floor of my borrowed bedroom with the door closed. I cried into a towel so no one would hear me. I thought about every dollar I had counted, every school lunch I had skipped for myself so I could save more, every coat I wore 2 winters too long so I wouldn't waste money. I thought about how small I suddenly felt in a house that was never mine. A week later, we moved to a smaller apartment on the edge of town. No backyard, no swing set, no warm casserole dish waiting on the porch, just noise, just traffic, just the sinking feeling that I had traded my quiet life for something much worse. The new apartment sat at the far edge of South Broadway, wedged between a pawnshop and a laundromat. With flickering neon from the street, it looked harmless enough. 3 floors of beige brick, a cracked asphalt lot in back. But inside, the hallways smelled of boiled cabbage and someone's chain-smoked cigarettes. Our unit faced the dumpsters. Michelle called it a temporary squeeze. I tried to believe her. For a few weeks, we moved carefully around one another, determined to keep the peace. After the restaurant fiasco, I made chili and cornbread. Brian mumbled thanks. Ron practiced his spelling lists at the kitchen counter. The quiet felt brittle, like glassware stacked too high on a shelf. Then the first rent notice arrived, printed in red ink, and the cracking began. One Thursday evening, Michelle asked me to sit with her while she balanced their checkbook. She pushed a mug of chamomile across the table and cleared her throat the way she used to before breaking bad news about a report card. "Mom, our budget's tight. Utilities, daycare, car payment. Would you mind pitching in? Even a couple $100 a month would help." She kept her eyes on the calculator as if she were asking an accountant and not her mother. I swallowed the sting and opened my wallet. The bills inside looked suddenly smaller than their face value. I laid out 2 crisp hundreds beside her mug. She reached for them with a grateful-sounding sigh that never reached her eyes. From then on, each Monday, I slipped folded cash under the sugar bowl. No one mentioned it aloud again, but the bowl grew heavier with silence. With money came expectations. At dawn, I walked Ron to school, pretending the spring rain was only mist so he wouldn't notice my thin coat had no hood. Back home, I swept floors already swept the night before, wiped fingerprints from a refrigerator none of us loved, sorted laundry into neat piles that smelled of lavender detergent I'd bought on sale. Brian worked odd hours now, rideshare shifts, delivery runs, and returned irritable. He complained the apartment was dusty, the meals too bland, the towels stiff. Each complaint landed like a pebble in my shoe, small, persistent, impossible to ignore. One afternoon, Ron developed a mild rash on his arms. Brian decided I had changed detergents. He cornered me in the hallway, holding the child's reddened elbow like evidence in a trial. "It's common sense, Mom. Read a label. You can't even manage that." The old librarian in me wanted to quote instructions off the bottle, but my voice stuck. Michelle watched from the bedroom doorway, lips parted as if to intervene, yet she said nothing. I realized, standing there beneath the buzzing hallway light, that silence could bruise more efficiently than words. Days blurred. I caught myself counting how many hours of service I performed before noon: dishes, floors, errands, emails answered for Michelle when she was swamped. At night, I lay awake, listening to the refrigerator motor kick on and off, timing its cycles like a metronome because numbers were easier than feelings. I clutched a photograph I kept hidden in a knitting pouch, Ron's 3rd birthday picnic back in Hannibal, frosting on noses, laughter caught mid-flight. My fingers traced the creases until the edges softened. Space tightened as spring turned to summer. Brian claimed the hall closet for golf clubs he rarely used, so my garden gloves and the trowel I'd brought as keepsakes were donated without warning. The cookie jar I loved disappeared next, along with 2 patchwork quilts my mother had sewn. "We're drowning in stuff," Michelle explained while scrolling her phone. "Minimalism is healthy." I nodded, though each vanished thing felt like a tile pried from the mosaic of my past. On the first warm Saturday, I took Ron to Coronado Let Park. We sailed paper boats on the pond, then split a pretzel from a vendor cart. He laughed when salt stuck to his chin. For an hour, the world shrank to that easy sound. Walking back, my muscles ached pleasantly. I imagined napping with a good book. At the door, Brian greeted us with a frown. "Park great." Meanwhile, the living room's a mess. I glanced inside, one cushion askew, a Lego on the rug, and felt absurdly guilty, as if I'd stolen time. The breaking point arrived on a muggy May afternoon thick with ozone. Michelle's work laptop sat open on the dining table, humming softly. I set down a sweating glass of water, misjudged the edge, and watched helplessly as beads trickled across the keys. The screen strobed, then faded to black. I lunged for a dish towel, blotting the surface. Brian came in at that moment, phone still to his ear. His jaw hardened. Seriously, he snapped, ending the call. Do you have any idea what that costs? It was an accident, I whispered. Accident? He lifted the laptop, droplets falling onto the carpet like punctuation. You push Ron too high on the swings, now you kill a computer. What's next? Set the place on fire. Michelle appeared, pale, arms crossed. She didn't touch him, didn't touch me. Brian slammed the ruined device onto the counter. Echoing down the hall, we can't keep covering your mistakes, he said. You drain our money and call it helping. Maybe it's time you start paying for the damage you cause. He stormed into the bedroom and shut the door so hard a picture frame rattled off the wall. Michelle lingered, eyes glassy, lips moving without sound. I waited for her to speak, but she only turned and followed him, closing the door with a soft click that felt louder than the slam. I stood there alone, towel in hand, heartbeat throbbing in my ears. My cheeks burned with something hotter than embarrassment, an old buried anger that had nowhere to go. I picked up the broken laptop, wiped the remaining droplets, and set it gently on the counter as though dignity could be salvaged by neatness. That night, Brian gathered my boxes, the ones still unpacked because there was nowhere to put them, and shuffled them into the living room corner like unwanted furniture. We need space, he muttered. Space, I noted, had become a currency I could no longer afford. Ron peeked from behind his bedroom door. I tried to smile at him, but my lips wouldn't cooperate. He disappeared again, and the hallway light cast my shadow longer than I remembered. I followed the sidewalk until the streetlights blinked out, pulling my little suitcase behind me like a stubborn child. The pre-dawn air had that early summer heaviness, warm over skin yet smelling faintly of rain and exhaust. At the corner of Cherokee and Minnesota, I found a weekly rate motel painted a shade of yellow that felt more hopeful in daylight. The clerk, a thin woman named Mrs. Diaz, slid a registration card toward me without looking up from her soap opera. $1.75 a week, she said, voice flat. Fresh towels on Tuesdays if the machine's working. The room was the size of my old pantry, pressed wood dresser, metal bed frame, a tiny sink rust-stained beneath the faucet. Someone before me had left a church flyer under the pillow, "You are not alone." I folded it in half and tucked it into my Bible, just in case the promise belonged to anyone willing to claim it. On the first of the month, my pension, one modest deposit of $2,000, landed in my checking account. I opened the banking app, subtracted rent, bus fare, a rough guess for groceries, and stared at the number that remained. It would keep the lights on if I used only one bulb at a time. I ironed my best blouse, still smelling of lavender from Hannibal, and set out to find work. A bakery 3 blocks south needed a counter clerk, but the owner's smile faltered when he realized the Mildred on the resume matched the gray in front of him. "Your experience is lovely," he murmured, sliding the paper back across the glass case, "but we're after a faster vibe." At a corner minimart, the manager shook my hand, scanned me up and down, then asked if I could lift 40-pound crates. I said I'd try. He frowned, thanked me, and locked the door behind me a little too quickly. A laundromat attendant position advertised a friendly atmosphere. The owner glanced at my birth date, chuckled, and said, "Sweetheart, those machines don't stop spinning, neither do the customers." He was polite enough to walk me out before flipping the sign to closed. The worst was a fast food place off Interstate 55. The teenage manager wore a headset like a crown. She looked at my application, then at me, then laughed outright. "Grandma, our lunch rush would bury you," she said, picking at her acrylic nails. "Go knit a scarf or something." I managed a nod, turned away, and felt tears prick before I reached the parking lot. Cars roared past, blurring my vision further. That afternoon, I sat on a park bench near Jefferson Elementary, too defeated even to open the bottled water I'd brought. School let out, and children poured through the gate like marbles from a jar, backpacks swinging, voices high and bright. A few parents handed out juice boxes. One mother peeled an orange and tucked slices into her daughter's palm. The smell of citrus drifted on the breeze, sharp and clean. I remembered Mr. John from the old middle school, a short, round man who pushed a stainless steel cart outside the gym every Friday, selling pretzels as thick as rope in plastic cups of soy milk. He once told me, "Don't sneer at the wheels, Mildred. This cart put 3 kids through college and kept my Lucille in her wheelchair when Medicare wouldn't." I hadn't sneered, I just never imagined a cart could be anything more than a snack stand. But watching those children devour after-school treats, I suddenly felt the same click inside my mind that used to happen when 2 jigsaw pieces finally found each other. That night, under the buzzing motel light, I made columns on motel stationery, costs and possibilities. A used food cart on Craigslist, $3,500. City food handler permit, $55. St. Louis County mobile food permit, Class A, $130. Ingredients, propane, a small cooler, maybe $800 more. I totaled the numbers twice, then a third time. When my hand stopped shaking, I realized if I emptied almost everything left in checking and kept next month's pension for rent, I could just barely swing it. I barely slept. At dawn, I called the cart seller, a man in fluorescent whose taco dream had fizzled. By evening, I was handing him a wad of bills so thick it felt like handing over my future in one painful lump. He helped me hitch the cart to a rented pickup and wished me luck. I named the cart Granny's Corner Bites with stick-on vinyl letters that wobbled a little but looked cheerful enough. The next week blurred into motion: surf-safe course at the community college, fingerprinting at the county office, health department inspection that involved a man named Roger shining a tiny flashlight into crevices I hadn't known existed. He tapped a clipboard, grunted approval, and slapped a green sticker on the side. "Keep it clean and stay off private lots," he advised. I promised I would. Before sunrise on opening day, I filled the cart's warmer with soft pretzels, coated them twice with butter so the salt would cling, and lined a cooler with diced watermelon and seedless grapes. I loaded a small griddle for hot dogs. The cart felt heavy at first, but once the wheels caught the sidewalk groove, it rolled better than expected. I sat up beside the school crossing guard, a man named Hank, who wore a neon vest and greeted me with a skeptical nod. Mothers hurried by, children tugging at their sleeves. I offered samples, tiny pretzel bites in paper cups. A few kids stared. One brave boy bought a hot dog for $2. By the final bell, I had sold 4 hot dogs, 3 pretzels, and 6 fruit cups. Profit after costs, $18.40. Not success, but more than standing in line for rejection. That night, I tasted my own ramen noodles, chicken flavor, extra water to feel fuller, and thought about how many pretzels I'd need to cover rent. The math didn't add up, but hope is funny. It blooms in soil too thin for anything else. The week crawled, $32 on Tuesday, $41 on Wednesday. When I added mini cheese cups, Thursday brought drizzle. Parents hurried past without pausing. I packed up early, shoes soaked, ankles sore, muttering encouragement to the cart as if it were an old mule in the motel lot. A kid on a BMX shouted, "Smells good, Granny," before pedaling away. I considered that a review. Friday began with a sky the color of pewter. I almost stayed in bed, but the cart seemed to stare at me accusingly from its corner. I wheeled it out past Hank's post at 3:05 p.m. The heavens opened, sheets of rain hammered the aluminum lid. Wind shoved so hard the entire cart tipped, crashing onto its side. Plastic tubs skittered across the sidewalk, grapes rolling like green marbles into the gutter. Hot dog water splashed my jeans. I scrambled to right the cart, heart pounding in my ears, but the ankle-high wind pushed like an unseen bully. My palms slipped, the metal burned cold despite the summer air. A young teacher with an umbrella ran to help. Together, we heaved the cart upright, but half the pretzels lay ruined in puddles. My apron clung to my skin, water dripped from my hair into my eyes. "You okay, she asked. I nodded, speech felt dangerous. One wrong syllable and tears might join the downpour. She pressed $50 into my hand, maybe pity, maybe kindness. Either way, I couldn't refuse. Back at the motel, I sat on the edge of the bed and opened the small jewelry box I'd hidden beneath folded socks. Inside lay a gold locket Jack had given me for my 55th birthday party at the library, the one with sheet cake and too much pink frosting. I thumbed the clasp, heard it click open, and saw the tiny photo of young Michelle in pigtails kissing my cheek. Reckoning, it hurt more than leaving it open. The pawn shop on Virginia Avenue was lit with harsh fluorescence and smelled of metal polish. The clerk looked at the locket through a loupe, weighed it, then counted out 6 crisp Benjamins. I slid the bills into my purse, reminded myself I was trading one piece of yesterday for a chance at tomorrow. I spent the night cleaning mud from the cart's wheels, scrubbing the griddle until it gleamed, making a list of sturdier lids and tie-down straps I would buy first thing in the morning. The motel air conditioner rattled like distant applause, or maybe that was just how determination sounds when there's no one else around to cheer. When dawn pushed thin light through the blinds, I brewed motel room coffee, too weak, too bitter, but hot enough to wake resolve. I slipped on dry sneakers, tied my apron twice around my waist, and wheeled Granny's corner bites back onto the sidewalk, past Mrs. Diaz emptying trash, past the city bus sighing at the curb. The cart's metal frame caught early sun like a signal to anyone willing to notice that beginnings don't always wait for perfect conditions. The first day back after the storm, I set up the cart half an hour early, mostly to reassure myself the wheels would still roll straight. I wiped each stainless panel until my reflection stared back, damp hair twisted into a bun, raincoat still smelling faintly of motel bleach. Hank, the crossing guard, lifted his coffee in greeting. "Rough week," he said. I nodded, laid out the chalkboard menu, and arranged pretzels in neat rows, butter shining under the street lamp. When the bell rang and children spilled onto the sidewalk, a little girl named Maisie pointed at the cart and tugged her father's sleeve. "Those are the soft ones," she whispered, eyes wide. He bought 2, one for her, one for himself, then closed his eyes after the first bite and said, "Well, that's a memory unlocked." The words warmed me all the way to my elbows. By the end of that week, I had sold through every pretzel and half the fruit. I walked back to the motel with the cash box pressed against my chest like a secret heartbeat. On the table under the flickering ceiling bulb, I counted the bills twice before writing the number, not profit, just gross, into a spiral notebook I'd salvaged from the discount bin. $28 Tuesday, $34 Wednesday, $56 Thursday. Friday broke my personal record at an even $70. I went to sleep hearing imaginary coins click, just like the library's old date stamper. Word traveled the way children share anything sweet. They told one another which cup had the most grapes, which pretzel knot was the softest. The following Monday, a 5th-grade teacher named Mrs. Sprague approached in a navy windbreaker, bought a fruit cup, and took a slow sip from the little wooden fork I provided. "You could teach our cafeteria a thing or two about seasoning," she said, tucking a $5 bill into the tip jar. From that day, she stopped by every morning for orange mango juice. Each time, she'd hand over exact change and add, "Save me my usual tomorrow, will you?" I started waking up early just to squeeze the citrus. Late April brought one of those mornings when fog hovered ankle-high, making every surface slick. I should have recognized the risk, but routine can dull caution. I was easing the cart off the curb when my right foot slid. The tray of pretzels flew like birds, scattering. Tupperware lids clattered, salt puffed. Across the pavement, the pain registered second. First came embarrassment, hot and sharp. Then 2 sets of hands appeared, a boy I recognized from Tuesday snack runs and, behind him, a woman in scrubs patterned with cartoon stethoscopes. "Easy there," she said, kneeling to brace my elbow. The boy chased runaway grapes while his mother pressed gentle fingers against my knee. "Name's Carla Diaz," she added, tightening the makeshift bandage she'd fashioned from her scarf. "I'm on shift at the clinic down the block. Come by and we'll clean this properly." My throat bobbed, words felt slippery. I managed a thank you and felt, beneath the sting of gravel in my skin, a warmth I hadn't touched in months. That afternoon, I limped to the clinic. Carla dabbed disinfectant, asked about tetanus shots, then poured 2 paper cups of vending machine cocoa. "Seen plenty of seniors hiding pain," she said. "Pride's a heavy backpack. Set it down once in a while." I told her about Hannibal, the library, the family I no longer lived with. She listened without interrupting, except to say, "You're tougher than you look." When I left, she pressed 2 adhesive knee wraps into my palm and winked. On the walk home, the wraps felt like medals. The very next week, I earned them. Dismissal time at Jefferson can resemble a startled flock. Kids dash without checking for traffic. I was restocking napkins when a soccer ball rolled into the street and a little boy darted after it. A van turned the corner faster than the driver could have anticipated. Small legs. My body moved before thought. I grabbed the back of the boy's jacket, yanked hard, and we tumbled together onto the asphalt's edge. The horn blared, brakes squealed. Hank sprinted over, cursing under his breath, while the boy's backpack thudded open, scattering spelling worksheets. He started sobbing, shock, not injury, and clutched my wrist. Parents clustered, questions flew. When the chaos settled, the van had driven off. Hank had filed an incident report, and the boy's mother held my hand with both of hers, repeating, thank you, until we were both shaky. I thought the story would end there, but 2 mornings later, a tall man in a tweed jacket appeared beside my cart. He introduced himself as Andrew Watkins, principal of Jefferson Elementary. "I hear you saved one of my students," he said. I shrugged, uncomfortable with the verb. He ordered a pretzel, chewed thoughtfully, then asked if I'd ever considered moving the cart inside. The cafeteria has an open nook near the gym doors, rain-free, guaranteed foot traffic, and frankly, our kids could use a healthier option than vending machine chips. My pulse quickened. The carts permit covered school property with administrative approval. Still, I hesitated, wary of rent or hidden strings. Mr. Watkins must have read my silence. "No fee," he added, smiling. "We'll treat you like a visiting vendor for after-school programs." He extended a business card and told me to stop by his office Friday after the final bell. The nook turned out to be perfect, an alcove just wide enough for the cart, with a view of both exit doors and a bulletin board plastered in crayon posters. I decorated my corner with holiday-colored napkins and a thrift shop letterboard that read, "Granny's Corner Bites, Fuel for Brains." Kids lined up in orderly fashion because cafeteria monitors kept order, and the numbers in my notebook began doubling, 82, 97, a glorious 112. On the day I introduced cinnamon sugar knots, Mrs. Sprague called them dangerously good and asked for the recipe. I told her half the secret was patience and the other half was butter, which seemed to satisfy her curiosity. Stability settled in like gentle weight. Mornings had rhythm: knead dough at 5, let it rise beside the motel radiator, shape knots by 6, boil and bake by 7, wheel the cart through back streets while traffic lights still blinked yellow. Evenings meant ledger tallies, supply lists, and an occasional second-hand mystery novel from the corner thrift. Sales were brisk, $115 before noon. So on my way back, I stopped at the corner Brookside Market to buy milk, plastic cups, and the day's fruit. Brookside is the sort of place where the gum rack outnumbers the produce aisle. The cashier, a freckled 20-something named Lana, sees me often enough to ask about new flavors. That afternoon, the lottery display beside her register flashed Missouri Lotto jackpot, $5 million. I glanced at it the way you glance at mannequins in store windows, present but irrelevant, while Lana rang up my milk. She tapped the plexiglass cover and grinned. "Feeling lucky, Miss Pretzel Lady? $2 could change your life." I laughed, patting the fleece pocket where my week's envelope rustled. "Honey, I'm almost fresh out of luck. Humor me," she said, already printing a quick pic. The slip fluttered between her fingers like a dare. I owed the universe at least one small gamble, so I shrugged and handed over 2 creased bills. Tickets stuffed into my purse, I balanced groceries on one hip and wheeled the cart back toward the motel, thinking only about tomorrow's dough ratio. That evening, I heated a can of tomato soup on the single hot plate, tore a grilled cheese sandwich into cubes, and perched on the edge of the bed. Channel 5's anchor delivered farm reports. A baseball score, then almost as filler reminded viewers the lotto numbers would crawl across the bottom of the screen. After the break, I dunked a sandwich cube, wiped my chin, reached for the notebook ledger, and felt the lottery ticket wink from the purse pocket like a firefly. Why not? I flicked on the lamp, slid the slip beside my bowl. and tuned my eyes to the ticker: 0, 8, 12, 24, 33, 41, 45. I read the screen once, then again slower, as though the digits were in a foreign language. My ticket showed the exact same 6 numbers printed in faded black ink. I fumbled for my glasses, smudged them, cleaned them on my sleeve, and pressed them back so hard. The bridge pinched my nose. The numbers hadn't changed. A rush of heat started at my neck, spread to my scalp, and sent my heart sprinting so fast I actually slapped my own chest as if to steady it. 5 million, I whispered to the empty room. The spoon slipped from my hand and clinked against the metal bowl. I reached for the remote, jacked up the volume, and listened to the announcer repeat the digits twice more. I walked to the bathroom, flicked on the harsh fluorescent, stared at myself, then marched back to the ticket to be sure it hadn't sprouted different numerals. While out of sight, my knees folded. I sank onto the thin carpet, soup forgotten, palms covering my mouth. Somewhere between a laugh and a sob escaped words kept looping: not possible. Not me, not possible, until the sentence lost meaning and only sound remained. I stayed on the floor long enough for the soup to cool, and a trail of ants to find the crumbs. By dawn, my shock had settled into a buzzing alertness. I packed the ticket, social security card, driver's license, and the business ledger into my canvas tote. Then caught the first metro bus downtown. At the Missouri lottery office, I stood in line behind a truck driver, with a $20 winner and an office clerk claiming $200. When my turn came, a woman in a navy blazer took my documents, scanned the ticket, and raised her eyebrows. She disappeared to confer with a supervisor. And I thought they'll tell me it's misprinted. Instead, she returned, shook my hand, and said, "Congratulations, Miss Harper. Let's discuss how you'd like your payout." The words lump sum sounded reckless, yet freeing. Taxes would bite off nearly a third, but I'd still walk out a multimillionaire. They photographed me, a dazed woman gripping a comically oversized check in front of a banner. Then someone passed me a packet on financial counseling. Security escorted me out a side door, into warm sunlight that looked suspiciously regular for a life-altering afternoon. I used a rideshare home, clutching the sealed envelope with the redemption receipt against my chest. The entire trip, keeping the secret, felt like balancing a tray of glasses in each hand. I still rose at 4 to bake. I still sliced peaches into neat fan shapes, yet every time I counted the day's earnings, I felt a private tremor, as though those tens and fives were play money while real treasure waited quietly in a bank vault. Up north, by Friday, the story leaked. It started with Hank, who'd seen my photo on the local news site. He waved a printed sheet like a church bulletin. Within hours, kids were breathlessly telling one another, the pretzel lady was richer than the principal. At lunchtime, Mr. Watkins knocked on my cartside panel and said, "If it's true, congratulations, and please don't retire on us just yet." I promised him I had no intention of abandoning my post. And the relief in his smile surprised me. Celebrations erupted in small sweet ways. Mrs. Sprague brought a balloon bouquet that kept bobbing against the cafeteria ceiling. Carla marched in, with a stethoscope still around her neck, and yelled, "Drinks on the nurse," before handing me a thermos of homemade horchata. Ron, my grandson, would have loved this chorus of joy, and the thought pinched my heart. But I folded the feeling away for later examination. Deciding how to spend the money took weeks of notebook scribbles and late-night prayers. First, I visited a tidy condo complex near Tower Grove Park. Brick facade, wheelchair accessible, elevator, balcony shaded by sycamore branches. And bought a 2-bedroom unit outright. The guest room held only a brass daybed and a reading lamp. But calling it guest felt like planting a seed for some day. Next, I located a vacant storefront 2 blocks from Jefferson. Formerly a music shop, its hardwood floors scarred with amplifier scuffs. The lease was reasonable. The renovations, on admittedly less so, but I signed anyway. Granny's Corner Bites would trade wheels for walls with an after-school seating nook and Saturday family brunch menu. Hank joked he'd finally sit down long enough to taste food hot, not lukewarm from a street corner. Charity needed no deliberation. I met with Mr. Watkins and handed him a check for $15,000 to refurbish the school library, new bean bag chairs, updated non-fiction audiobook players for struggling readers. In honor of my past life, we dubbed it the Harper Reading Haven. I could almost feel my old library card warming in my pocket. A financial advisor named Miss Kwan guided me through setting up a simple trust. Think of it as a fenced garden, she explained. You pick fruit when you need it, but no one climbs in to trample the roots. I left her office lighter, documents in one hand and a sense of future in the other. The first night in the condo, I unpacked slowly, folding linens into unfamiliar closets. On the mantel, I placed the framed picture of my late husband Jack and me from our 5th anniversary picnic, sunburned cheeks, teeth vitamin D white. I whispered, "Life hasn't dropped me after all." Jack then sat on the balcony to watch dusk bruise the sky. Cicadas, word traffic hissed, and somewhere a child laughed, maybe over a pretzel knot, maybe just at summer itself. I leaned back in the deck chair, palms resting on the wooden arms, letting the city's pulse sync with my own. Saturday mornings in the new shop have their own music, the hiss of the espresso wand, spatula taps against cast iron, the hum of kids' chatter seeping through the door while they press faces to the glass to see if cinnamon knots are ready. I keep the lights low at first, soft amber, so the place feels like sunrise itself. At 6:30, I was ladling apple butter glaze over fresh pretzels when the entry bell jingled. Too early for customers. Michelle stepped in, clutching a paper sack from an upscale bakery. Behind her loomed Brian, cheeks flushed despite the cool air, eyes already cataloguing every shiny appliance as though calculating resale value. I felt my heartbeat quicken, not with fear but with the oddest déjà vu, like meeting characters from a book I'd closed long ago. "Mom," Brian spread his arms. "Look at you. Chef apron and everything. We heard about your little windfall. Congrats." Michelle's smile wobbled. "We wanted to bring croissants. Thought you might be sick of your own baking." Her voice was a size too small, as if borrowed from childhood and no longer fitting. I set the glaze ladle down, wiped my hands on the towel looped at my hip. The shop smelled of warm vanilla, something comforting and unhurried. Their presence felt like a chill draft sneaking under the door. Brian leaned an elbow on the counter. "So, 5 million, huh? You really should have called. Big news like that. We're family." "Family?" I repeated, tasting the word the way you taste milk you suspect has turned. "Interesting concept." Michelle shifted, glancing at the back hallway where the walk-in freezer hummed. "We're in a bit of a bind, Mom. Brian's last venture. Well, we've hit a rough patch. Just something to tide us over. A few thousand would keep the creditors calm." Brian chuckled as if we shared a joke. "Nothing huge, pocket change for a lucky lady." He tapped the marble countertop twice, the click of his wedding band sharp. I studied their faces, Michelle's makeup carefully applied but unable to hide fatigue, Brian's confident grin failing to cover the tick of a jaw muscle. For a moment, my mind flicked to Ron. Where was he this morning? Did he know his parents were here? I poured 2 glasses of water from the dispenser and placed them on the counter, adding 2 of my plain butter rolls, still warm. "Have breakfast," I said. "You must have been up early." Michelle curled her fingers around the glass but didn't drink. "Mom, we need money." "What am I to you?" I asked, voice steady. "A bank? A safety net? A woman you tolerate if she pays admission?" Brian's smile cracked. "Mom, don't turn this into drama. We're here because we trust you." "Trust?" I echoed, remembering the night I'd left their apartment with nothing but a suitcase and a bruise of betrayal blooming under my ribs. "You trusted me right out of every dollar I'd saved. How did that turn out for all of us?" Michelle's eyes filled, not with tears exactly, but with the pressure that precedes them. "I was wrong," she whispered. "I know that now. Just help me keep my house. Help Ron keep his school." The bakery bag crinkled in her fist behind her. Brian's composure slipped into irritation. "We're not asking for the moon. Sign a short-term loan. We'll pay interest." "Interest?" I almost laughed. "Do you remember promising to double my investment?" "I do. I remember every zero. He straightened, voice dropping. Fine, if you're going to be petty, say so. But don't act like we didn't give you anything. You lived with us. You're right, I said. You gave me a roof, and then you pulled it away. I slid the rolls closer to their side of the counter. This is what I can offer: bread and water if you're hungry. If you're thirsty, drink. Money is off the menu. Michelle's shoulders sagged. She looked at Brian, seeking some cue. He tightened his hands until the knuckles whitened. She'd rather hoard it, he muttered, loud enough for the espresso machine to hear. All that cash just wasting while her own daughter drowns. Brian, Michelle hissed, pulling at his sleeve. He jerked free. You know what? Go ahead. Keep your precious millions. Rot in this little sugar shack. His voice rose, echoing against tile. A mother and her son paused outside, uncertain whether to enter. Brian noticed and barked, "Take a picture, kid. This is what greed looks like." I felt heat rise in my cheeks but forced my tone calm. Please lower your voice. There are children outside. Always the librarian, he scoffed, shushing people who tell the truth. Michelle tried again, softer. Mom, please. Even a small loan. I shook my head. If I give you money today, someone worse will ask for it tomorrow. Fix your life first. Show me you can stand without. Leaning on the next person you knock over, tears finally spilled. Michelle set the untouched croissants on the counter like an offering, then brushed past Brian toward the door. He followed, muttering curses. Halfway out, he spun, pointing at the ceiling fixtures. Enjoy your fancy lights while they last. Luck runs out. The bell clanged as the door swung wide. Outside, Michelle grabbed his arm, words urgent but muffled. He tore free, yelling, "She's just a selfish old woman." Passers-by turned. One high schooler lifted a phone. I watched the recording light bloom red. I steadied my breathing, counted to 5 as steam hissed from the milk wand. The mother and little boy stepped in timidly. "Are you still open?" she asked. "Of course," I said, offering my warmest smile. "Would you like cinnamon or plain today?" The boy eyed the tray. "Cinnamon, please," his voice trembled. Children sense tension the way dogs sense storms. I handed him the biggest knot and the mother a coffee on the house. Business resumed, orders scribbled, cups filled, laughter rising again. Yet a tremor thudded under my breastbone. Around 10:30, Carla arrived in her scrubs, hair pulled into her no-nonsense bun. Saw fireworks outside. "You okay?" She nudged a box of medical-grade bandages onto the counter. She knows I slice myself on sheet pan edges more often than I admit. "Family visit," I said. Her eyebrows arched. "Everything sorted?" "Not yet," I said, twisting a cleaning cloth. "But the line is drawn." Carla squeezed my forearm. "Lines are good. Keeps the heart from spilling everywhere." She ordered her usual hawkata, left a $5 tip, and slipped out. I watched her weave through the lunch crowd, then forced myself to wipe tables, refill napkin dispensers, anything that kept my hands busy while thoughts rattled like marbles in a jar. By afternoon, the confrontation felt distant, like a dream forgotten upon waking but leaving the pillow damp. I closed shop at 3, locking the door with practice turns, and carried the day's deposit bag up the block to the credit union. The teller smiled, unaware. Her pleasant, "Have a blessed evening," landed sweeter than any hymn. Back home in the condo, I made tea, chamomile with honey, and sat near the balcony window. The city's late summer heat shimmered off rooftops, cicadas buzzed a steady electric note. I tried to picture Michelle's face as she walked away, hurt, desperate, a flicker of shame. My anger, hot as a stovetop coil, cooled into something heavier, grief for what might never mend. Yet beneath that weight lay an unexpected calm, an understanding that boundaries can hurt even as they heal. I opened the ledger, recorded the day's totals, and noticed my handwriting was steady. The envelope marked future in the desk drawer had grown plump. The trust fund statements lay clipped together, neat as recipe cards. My life, once scattered like pretzels in the rain, now stacked itself in tidy rows. But order does not erase ache. I set the pen down, pressed fingers to my eyelids, and pictured Ron's freckled nose, wondering whether he still liked his apple slices shaped into little boats. 2 months passed after Brian's tirade, and the season edged from late summer gold into the cool, smoke-scented hush of early October. Saturday dawn found me portioning pumpkin spice batter into muffin tins, letting the nutmeg curl around the room while Ron's favorite cartoon theme drifted from the shop's small radio. At 8 sharp, I unlocked the door, propped it with the brass wedge Hank had carved for me, and flipped the sign to open. The town was still rubbing sleep from its eyes when the bell above the frame chimed once, then again, unsure, and Michelle stepped inside. She was thinner than I remembered. One cheekbone bloomed violet, the hue trying to fade but not yet ready to forgive. Her posture had folded inward, arms wrapped protectively around Ron, whose backpack straps dug into his shoulders. My grandson's eyes found mine first, wide, tentative, then darted back to the broom. A single sob cracked her restraint. She managed to whisper, "I'll mop every night." I chuckled, a sound tinged with both sadness and fondness. "You'll learn inventory and spreadsheets before you ever touch a mop. This place needs brains more than bleach." That evening, I led mother and son to my condo. Ron chose the day bedroom, exclaiming over the quilts, patchwork wolves. Michelle showered, emerging in borrowed pajamas that still carried faint notes of lavender detergent from Hannibal days. She sank onto the sofa, palms open on her thighs, body humming with exhaustion too deep for conversation. I brewed chamomile and sat beside her, neither of us speaking until steam faded into dusk. Over the next weeks, the shop found a new rhythm. Michelle rose at 5 to help me proof yeast, learning that patience and precise water temperature were kinder teachers than any lecture. At 9, she retreated to the office nook where ledgers waited. Her old accounting skills resurfaced, tentative at first, then confident. She discovered supplier discounts, renegotiated flour delivery, and even plotted seasonal profit projections that made my head spin. Ron stationed himself after school at the homework stool near the espresso machine, trading math answers for extra cinnamon dust. Customers noticed the cadence, mother and daughter passing trays, laughing softly, occasionally touching elbows like tuning forks, finding shared pitch. A month in, Michelle handed me an envelope labeled first paycheck. Inside, her calculated wage minus rent for the guest room. "Company policy," she said, smiling with more eyes than teeth. We posted the stub on the staff corkboard, population 2, and celebrated with strawberry milkshakes at the corner diner. She toasted me with whipped cream foam and whispered, "Thank you for the second first chance." Not all consequences arrived wrapped in healing. 3 weeks later, Brian limped into the shop near closing, eyes bloodshot, shirt half untucked. "Loan sharks," he gasped before I could ask. "They want their cut, and they sent pictures." He slid a phone across the counter, a photo of his car windshield spiderwebbed by a baseball bat, another of a broken apartment lock. "I don't know where else to go," his voice cracked like dry timber. Michelle emerged from the kitchen, flour on her forearm. She froze, then placed herself between us. "Leave," she said, voice steady. "We can't help you." Brian's gaze flicked to me, searching for a crack in my resolve. I folded a bakery box around the day's leftovers and pushed it across the counter. "Eat," I told him. "Hunger clouds judgment." He scoffed, swiped the box, and muttered a curse I'd once washed his mouth out for when he was 23. The door slammed so hard 2 light fixtures quivered. Michelle trembled but did not cry. I wrapped an arm around her shoulders. The echo of slammed wood faded, leaving only the quiet hum of refrigeration and the smell of baked apples. Autumn deepened, maple leaves littered the sidewalk like scraps of amber paper. Inside the shop, we debuted salted caramel pretzel bites. Carla called them danger in a cup. Mr. Watkins invited Michelle to speak at Career Day about small business budgeting. Her hands shook at the podium, but Ron sat in the front row grinning, and she found her rhythm by the second slide. Hank still carved little projects between crosswalk shifts. He brought us a tiny wooden Ron, complete with a backpack, to perch on the pastry case. When winter break arrived, I closed the shop for 10 days, my first real vacation since retirement that never quite happened. Michelle managed payroll remotely while Ron and I flew to New Mexico on a whim. We hiked the petroglyph trails, sand warm beneath the December sun, and mailed a postcard to the shop scout, new flavors, green chili pretzel. Michelle tacked it on the corkboard alongside her paycheck. On New Year's Eve, we volunteered at a shelter downtown, rolling dough into modest dinner rolls, brushing them with butter. Just before service, Ron asked why people lined up in the cold for food. I said, sometimes life bumps people off their path, and a hot meal can point them back. He nodded, serious in his oversized apron, then carried trays two at a time, muscles trembling but proud. That night, fireworks cracked over the skyline as we stood on my balcony wrapped in thrift store blankets. Michelle's face glowed pink in the reflection. The bruise had long healed, replaced by a softness I remembered from her college days. She leaned her head against my shoulder, and in the lull between bursts said, "Mom, I'm sorry for everything." Her voice held no desperation this time, only truth. I kissed the crown of her hair and answered, "I know." We watched colors bloom against the dark, each spark fading into smoke, and then another rising in its place, wondering quietly what patterns the next ones might draw across the sky. Mildred's journey reminds us that strength is not always loud, sometimes it rises quietly, one boundary at a time. Many women who have spent decades caring for others hesitate to protect their own future, trusting family, signing nothing, believing love will cover every debt. Yet Mildred shows that safeguarding your finances is not selfishness, it is self-respect. Her late-life reinvention, pushing a food cart, learning licenses, building a storefront, proves that starting over is possible at any age, even when the world labels you too old or too soft. She forgave, but she did not bankroll new mistakes. That nuance matters. Forgiveness can heal the heart, while clear limits protect the mind and wallet. For viewers facing similar tensions with adult children, let Mildred's story encourage you to pause before co-signing, to draft written agreements even within the family, and to trust your own resilience if everything falls apart. Above all, remember that dignity is not given by relatives or bank balances, it is claimed daily in the choices we make. Choices to work honestly, to demand respect, and to keep our doors open only to those who approach with the same integrity. If this story touched you, we invite you to like the video and subscribe to our channel. At Forgotten Mothers, we share real, heartfelt stories that honor the quiet strength of women like Irene. To every mother, grandmother, and caregiver watching this, you are not alone. You are not forgotten, and your story matters. Thank you for spending your time with us today.